My friend Schwartzy asked me to speak, and it's been about 10 days. I've been thinking every day, what should I say? So I concluded that I have absolutely no idea what to say. And I felt very guilty about that because, I was thinking about it every day. It's been wearing on me day and night. Been dreaming about it, having nightmares about it. What should I say? And on the way down, I said, I should stop feeling guilty about it, that I absolutely have no idea what to say, and I think that's perfectly okay. This is not a Jewish Journal column. This has no cogent opening or middle and end. This is a moment that really overwhelmed me with grief. And the only things that really came to mind were moments of intense grief that I felt. And what were they? When my father passed away, I remember I came out of his bedroom in the house in Montreal, and who do I see in the living room? It was Schwartzy. He just showed up, I don't think I even had time to tell him. But he found out. He took the first flight to Montreal, and he showed up in the living room. And I don't think I'll ever forget, because for like 48 hours, I think he just literally lived with my family. And he told stories, and it was just time I'll never forget. And then there was last Friday night, Schwartzy came over, and again, we're in this moment of grief, and we have 60 people in our house, and they're all from Eta Israel, and there's, kids with Down syndrome and autistic, and counselors with them. It was a whole big group for Shabbos, and Schwartzy and I were talking about when the Rebbe's wife passed away. And somehow, as soon as Shabbos hit, the mitzvah of being happy on Shabbos sort of took over from the grief. And that's what sort of kept Schwartzy and I going that night, because you can almost feel sort of the grief going into Shabbos and being transformed into the joy of Shabbos. So that was a second moment. And then my mind started to wander. I remember I'm a huge fan of Abraham Lincoln. And a client of mine once gave me, there was the best English writing ever in Cambridge University was a letter that Lincoln wrote to a mother who lost 5 sons in the Civil War. And it was one of those situations where, there are no words, but he found the words. So I dug that up. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can Google it. It's a letter to Mrs. Bixby, and he sort of accomplished the impossible. He actually found the words to say at that time, but I'm not Lincoln, so I don't really have the words, but he had them. Because I knew the thing that I really didn't want to do was come here and try to make us all feel good, because I don't like when people do it to me. And it's really, feelings are none of my business. The idea of feeling the grief is a very important thing, and it's okay to feel it. I was with a Holocaust survivor yesterday, Max Webb. I met him with Mendy Sunday morning at Cantor's, and I invited him because I wanted him to give some money to a friend of mine from Jerusalem. So he went on and on and on and talked to us for an hour and a half. We missed 3 meetings, but I was riveted. He's like in his 90s, and he kept telling us one story after another. He was in the Holocaust. He said things that I'm not going to repeat, but he felt such intense grief in the horrors that he saw as a kid in the Holocaust. And then he came out here in the 50s and built this empire. And you look in his office, and all the walls were like he built this building, and he gave this at Bnei Brak, and he gave this yeshiva. I mean, literally, his walls is full of hundreds of millions of dollars of mitzvahs that this man did since he survived the Holocaust. And he's not a professor. He's not a very sophisticated man. And all he kept saying was, I had to go on. I had to go on. But you can tell that, 67 years later, the grief that he felt at seeing these babies get murdered in the Holocaust absolutely never left him. And I asked him, I said, do you think about this? Do you remember it? He says, I remember it like it was yesterday. So here's a man who has internalized this intense trauma that he felt, yet he builds this empire. by which he's able to do these incredible mitzvahs. And it struck me that maybe in the end that's the Jewish way. That, the human way is to find one direction. That's the human way, is we got to find one way because that makes us more comfortable. So it could be either I'm overwhelmed with grief, or the other way is I'm going to completely transform it and go right to the mitzvah and feel positive about it and start building. I think the Jewish way is to sort of have both, like Max Webb, like I felt yesterday, to have both with us at the same time, to feel the grief for this unspeakable tragedy, but at the same time to feel this need to still fulfill the word of God and to do the mitzvah in their honor. I had two encounters with the mother, Yael. The first one was we did a magazine on the Holy Issue of Shabbat. And it was like last minute I realized I had all these amazing writers doing on Shabbat and I didn't have Schwartzy in it. I said, it's ridiculous. He is Mr. Shabbat. So I called him up. I said, Schwartzy, we're on deadline. Can you send me something for Shabbat? Can I interview you? Something. He said, you got to speak to my daughter, Yael. I'm sorry, Hindal. So I called her, and the first thing that came to mind was paper plates. Because, she said the whole thing about Shabbat was paper plates. We knew that as long as we had enough paper plates, we could serve hundreds of people. All we needed was the Frisbees, paper plates. And she did an article. I mean, we had like Shimon Peres, and we had, Sharansky and Ginsburg, with like really some amazing names in there. And the only article that people really talked about was the Swerdlov article, the miracle of paper plates. That's the one that caught people's eye. We had a big paper plate, and it was miracle of paper, and she would say that she grew up with this miracle of paper plates because every Friday night her parents would have, 60 strangers for Shabbat. And then the other time was in her house in Jerusalem. Mendy was my gracious host, and we spent a Shabbat. I don't know if you've ever had these Shabbats. If you've been to Stewie Wax's, you probably had it. The Shabbat that never end, where you sit down and when you wake up and when you're ready, when you're done with the meal, it's time for Havdalah. I've had a few of those, like a handful. They're like memorable. You never forget them. Anyways, one of the ones that I had, it was in Jerusalem at their house with Mendy. We sat down. We went through every Sephardic niggin ever written, every Hasidic niggin. We even went into the Misnagid niggin. We sang everything. We drank everything. It was the Shabbos that would never end. I crawled back to the King David. I remember distinctly, and I don't even drink. So that was there was such an intense feeling of joy. The joy that she spoke about in Olam magazine, in the article, The Miracle of Paper Plates, was the joy that I felt in her house, in her home on Shabbat. So this is my dichotomy, On the one hand, I just feel the overwhelming grief. I had trouble functioning for a week. But on the other hand, it was the joy of Shabbat that we felt with Schwartzy last week. And it reminded me that somehow, the Jewish challenge is to find a way to keep both of those things in us at the same time, to honor the Jewish soul that left us, and to feel the pain and the grief, but at the same time to continue on, like Max Webb said to me yesterday, I had to go on, I had no choice.